Your higher self has already spoken to you. You simply didn't listen. The contact has already occurred. The message has already reached you. Something inside you already felt it, even if at that moment you didn't fully understand it. And if you are watching this video right now, there is a very high probability that something strange has happened to you recently. A sign, a coincidence, a thought that appeared out of nowhere, an emotion you didn't know how to name. Deep down you felt it probably meant something bigger, but even so you ignored it. And that is the real problem we are going to dismantle step by step today. Because your higher self has already made contact with you. The problem was the label you put on that experience. You called it a fluke, imagination, fatigue, anxiety, anything but what it actually was. And before this video ends, you are going to understand why that happens. You are going to recognize the exact signals your soul has been sending you for months. You're going to discover why you've been feeling invisible lately for no apparent reason, why certain delays in your life are actually protection in disguise, and you are going to learn to distinguish between the fear that holds you back and the fear that warns you that you are close to a massive change. Stay until the end because toward the middle of the video, I am going to reveal something to you that most people take years to understand, and that could completely change the way you interpret your life from this day forward. But before we get to that revelation, we need to step back a bit. Because to understand the message, you first have to understand why your mind didn't receive it the first time. There are moments when reality suddenly stops feeling permanent. Not in a depressing way. It's not an emotional collapse. It's more like a strange shock of consciousness that appears without warning and completely changes how everything around you feels for a few seconds. You might be walking past a brownstone in Brooklyn or a building in downtown Chicago that you've seen your whole life, and suddenly it seems ancient, as if time itself had become visible for an instant. Or you're sitting in the middle of your normal routine and, out of nowhere, a very quiet thought hits you. One day, all of this will no longer be here. And for a second, your whole life feels fragile. That feeling isn't there to scare you. It's there to wake you up. Because the higher self sometimes forces you to feel the temporary nature of reality all at once. Not to sink you into hopelessness, but to break the illusion that you have infinite time to become who you truly are. Most people postpone their real lives without even realizing it. They procrastinate, they delay, they say tomorrow, they say, when I'm ready, they say when I have more money, when I have more stability, when the moment is perfect. And meanwhile the years pass, and the life they imagined becomes increasingly distant, increasingly blurred, until one day it becomes a simple memory of something they never dared to try. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that the life they deeply imagine is just escapism. They treat it like a fantasy because their current reality doesn't look like that image at all. But what if that vision keeps returning to your mind for a reason? What if your higher self brings you back over and over to the same feeling, the same environment, the same version of yourself, because it's trying to show you something that is actually possible for you? Most people don't understand how strange it actually is to be able to visualize a completely different life with such clarity, a different way of waking up, different people around you, a different energy, different conversations, different emotions. That level of internal clarity isn't random. Your mind doesn't repeatedly build what your spirit has no intention of touching. And the strongest part of all is that people discard these visions too quickly because they don't know how they would come true. The moment reality doesn't immediately match the vision, they call it unrealistic. But your higher self isn't showing you the full staircase. It's showing you the direction. Many people think fear means they are going in the wrong direction. But sometimes fear appears because a part of you already knows that your life cannot stay the same forever. That's why some of you have been feeling this constant tension lately. You try to relax into your normal routines, but something inside refuses to settle in completely. You start imagining bigger things for yourself, and immediately you feel resistance. Not because you are incapable, but because comfort has silently become part of your identity. And your higher self is trying to break that attachment little by little. And before moving forward to the most revealing part of the video, I need to pause here for a moment, because what I'm going to tell you now connects directly with everything we've already talked about. If you've reached this point in the video, it wasn't by chance. Something inside you is looking for deeper answers, and precisely for people like you, who are already feeling the internal call, there is a material that can enormously accelerate this process of awakening and alignment with your higher self. It's called the 7 Keys to Prosperity, and it's not just another piece of motivational content. It's a system designed specifically to activate in your life the oldest and most ignored principle of all, the attraction of wealth from within before it manifests on the outside. Most people try to attract abundance from exhaustion, from need, from urgency, and that's why they get frustrating and temporary results. The 7 Keys to Prosperity teach you to do exactly the opposite. Each of those 7 keys corresponds to a specific internal block that most people carry without knowing it. Blocks that prevent money, opportunities, and resources from reaching your life naturally. When you align your energy with the correct frequency, you stop chasing abundance and start receiving it. If you identified with everything we've covered in the video so far, this material was practically designed for you. The link is right below in the description, and I deeply recommend that you give it a chance before you keep postponing the version of your life that keeps calling you from within. Now, let's continue, because what's coming is even deeper. People stay in situations that drain them for much longer than necessary, simply because familiarity feels safer than possibility. That feeling that has been following you everywhere isn't there to torture you. It's there because deep down, you already know that your next chapter is going to require a different version of you, a more honest version, a version that stops shrinking just to maintain temporary comfort, and eventually, your higher self will make staying the same feel more uncomfortable than changing. That's how you know the message is getting louder. Many people secretly believe that their higher self is disappointed in them, disappointed that they are still confused, still struggling, still repeating patterns they thought they would have escaped by now. But that is one of the biggest misunderstandings people carry about spiritual growth. Your higher self isn't standing above you, judging your progress as if it were an impossible standard you keep failing to meet. In reality, your higher self sees your current version with an almost painful level of compassion, because it already understands things that your current mind still battles to accept. It understands why you made certain decisions. It understands how exhausted you've been. It understands the pressure you've carried in silence while pretending to be okay in front of everyone else. The version of you that keeps judging itself is still trapped inside the storm. Your higher self is already on the other side of it. That's why the message they've been sending you lately might not actually be about becoming more. Maybe it's about finally letting go of the shame that convinced you that you were somehow failing at life. Some of you have spent years feeling guilty for not being further ahead, for not healing fast enough, for not having become the person you thought you would be by now. But your higher self doesn't measure your value based on speed. It never did. And once you truly understand that, something inside you starts to relax for the first time in a long while, because you realize you were never behind. You were growing in ways you couldn't see, while you were too busy criticizing yourself for not blooming faster. Some of you have felt strangely invisible lately. People overlook you more. Certain friendships feel distant. Conversations feel disconnected. You walk into spaces that used to feel natural, and now it almost feels as if you are no longer emotionally attached to them in the same way. At first, it can feel personal. It can feel like rejection. But what if it's actually protection? What if your higher self is intentionally pulling you out of visibility for a while because something in you is changing too fast to remain exposed to the same environments without being dragged backward? Many people don't realize how dangerous premature visibility can be. The moment people feel comfortable with a specific version of you, they unconsciously start to resist your growth because your change forces them to face their own stagnation. Some people only know how to love the version of you that was emotionally convenient for them, and that's why this phase can feel so strange. You aren't quite where you're going yet, but you don't entirely belong where you used to be either. You can feel yourself emotionally outgrowing certain environments before your physical life has even changed. The higher self understands this process much better than you do. Sometimes it intentionally removes the noise, the attention, and even certain connections, because it's trying to prevent external influence from shaping you again and leading you back to old patterns. Being invisible isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's the only way a new version of you can finish forming without being interrupted every 5 seconds by people who insist on reminding you of who you used to be. Most people are taught to trust inspiration while distrusting obsession, but your higher self often communicates in exactly the opposite way. Inspiration comes and goes. Obsession stays. It follows you for years. It keeps drawing your attention to the same ideas, the same visions, the same kind of life, even when you try to ignore it or convince yourself it's unrealistic. Think about the things you keep returning to when no one is watching. The topics you research late at night for no apparent reason. The kind of work you secretly wish you could do for a lifetime. The fantasies you've carried since childhood that still haven't disappeared no matter how many years pass. Most people discard these things because they don't seem practical enough to build a life around. But what if those fixations are actually the clearest instructions you've ever received in your life? Your deepest obsessions are often your soul recognizing itself before your mind catches up. That's why certain interests feel emotionally charged in a way you can't explain. It's not random curiosity, it's recognition. Your higher self keeps pulling your attention toward things that contain pieces of your true nature. But society trains people to betray those signals very early on. People are told to prioritize security, status, and predictability. So little by little, they disconnect from the things that actually make them feel alive, and after enough time, they stop trusting themselves completely. The problem is that the things that genuinely belong to you tend to follow you no matter how many times you abandon them. They keep appearing in different forms because they were never designed to leave you alone. Your higher self knows something that your impatience doesn't. And look at something even more interesting. Obsessions that come from the soul have a very particular characteristic. They don't wear out over time. While passing whims and cravings evaporate in a matter of weeks or months, the obsessions of the soul stay with you for years, even decades. They might go dormant for seasons, but they always return. And when they return, they do so with more strength than before, as if the silence had only served to concentrate their energy. That is one of the most reliable signals your higher self sends you, and almost no one recognizes it in time. Many of you feel delayed right now. You feel that life keeps slowing down just when you start to gain momentum. Opportunities stall, plans change, things take longer than expected. Meanwhile, you see other people moving forward faster, and you start to question yourself internally. But what if your delay isn't a punishment? What if it's protection? Some people would have destroyed themselves emotionally if they had received everything they wanted too soon. They would have attached themselves to lifestyles that looked exciting but would have slowly emptied them out. They would have surrounded themselves with people who only loved the unfinished version of them. They would have confused temporary validation with purpose. And that is the uncomfortable thing about timing. Most people only judge the moment based on what they want now, not on who they would become after receiving it. Not every closed door is a rejection. Some doors close because the version of you that was approaching them wouldn't have survived what was on the other side. Your higher self sees further than your current emotions see. It understands what certain environments, relationships, and forms of success would have turned you into if they had arrived too early. That's why some people are pushed into slower seasons, where almost everything feels uncertain. It's not because their life is failing. It's because something deeper is making sure you don't build your future on the wrong foundations. And one day you're going to look back at certain delays with relief instead of frustration, because you're finally going to understand what they were protecting you from. Your soul already knows that your life is about to change. That's why nothing feels normal now. There is a very specific sensation that occurs before a major change in someone's life, and most people don't recognize it for what it is. They think they are becoming ungrateful, restless, emotionally unstable, or disconnected, when in reality they are standing in the psychological space between a version of themselves that is ending and another that is beginning. It creates this strange internal pressure that is hard to explain to the people around you, because technically nothing might look different from the outside yet. You keep waking up in the same room in London or your suburban house in Surrey, talking to the same people, following the same routines. But inside, something feels out of place in a way that can no longer be ignored. It's not exactly anxiety. Anxiety feels chaotic. This feels intentional. It feels as if your mind were slowly losing its emotional attachment to things that used to absorb you completely. Conversations that used to feel entertaining now feel repetitive. Certain friendships suddenly feel temporary, almost as if your spirit already knew they couldn't follow you where you're going. You start to look at routines you once defended and realize they have become emotionally lifeless. And then the strangest thing starts to happen. You feel drawn toward things you can't yet fully explain. Different environments, different ideas, different ambitions, different ways of living that don't even make complete sense to your logical mind yet. But something deeper inside you keeps leaning in that direction anyway. That's what people don't understand about the higher self. It doesn't always reveal the destination immediately, because most people would try to control the process too early if they knew exactly where they were headed. Sometimes the higher self just removes the attachment to your current reality first. It slowly makes your old life stop fitting emotionally, so that movement becomes inevitable. The next chapter of your life usually starts with a quiet dissatisfaction that nothing external can quite fix. And this is where people become dangerous to themselves, because they confuse the transition with failure. They panic and try to force themselves back into old emotional patterns because uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. They tell themselves they should just be grateful, settle down, stop thinking so much, stop wanting different things. But deep down, they already know that something irreversible has begun. Your higher self has a very strange way of preparing you for expansion. And now comes the most important part of this whole video, the part that will probably completely change how you interpret your own life from today on. I want you to pay close attention, because what I'm going to tell you now is something that most people take years to understand, and many never manage to understand at all. One of the biggest lies people unconsciously live under is the belief that there is a limit to how good your life specifically can become. Not for other people, not in theory, for you. Most people carry an invisible ceiling they never question, a limit on how much love they can feel, a limit on how much success they can achieve, a limit on how peaceful, fulfilled, respected, attractive, creative, abundant, or free they can be before something inside them starts to panic and drags them back again. And the terrifying thing is that this ceiling usually operates completely unnoticed. People say they want a better life, but the moment life starts to align too much, to become too real, too similar to the version they secretly dreamed of, something inside them starts to manufacture reasons to retreat. Suddenly they become fearful, suspicious, self-destructive. They start to doubt opportunities they once prayed for. They sabotage relationships that actually feel healthy. They convince themselves they are being unrealistic. And all of this happens because their nervous system has been trained to believe that suffering is more familiar than expansion. Most people aren't blocked by reality. They are blocked by what they subconsciously believe they are allowed to receive from reality. That is the true trap. And that's why many spend decades working hard, striving, trying, but always receiving just enough to survive and never what is necessary to truly live. It's not that the universe is punishing them. It's that they are emotionally aligned with the ceiling they placed inside themselves many years ago, probably when they were still children. That's why the true transformation your higher self is trying to create has nothing to do with becoming a different human being. It has everything to do with permission. The moment you stop treating your desires as if they needed endless justification, your perception of reality starts to change in ways that almost feel unsettling. You start to notice opportunities that were always there but were emotionally invisible to you before. People respond to you differently because your energy no longer carries the same doubt and self-rejection. Conversations change, decisions change, even the way you walk through life changes, because you stop interacting with reality as someone who is waiting to be rejected. And this is where people completely misunderstand manifestation. They think manifestation is about forcing the universe to give them things. But your higher self understands something much deeper than that. It understands that reality often reflects the level of life you emotionally allow yourself to sustain, without guilt, without fear, and without self-punishment. The reason some people remain stuck for years isn't because they lack potential. It's because they remain emotionally loyal to an identity built around limitation. They still feel safer expecting disappointment than expecting expansion, because disappointment feels familiar and controllable. Think of it this way. If someone grew up hearing that money was hard to get, that successful people were selfish, that wanting more was being ambitious in a bad way, that standing out was dangerous, that showing yourself fully was risky, how could that same person as an adult receive abundance without something inside them rejecting it immediately? The subconscious treats everything that goes beyond the familiar ceiling as a threat, not a blessing. That's why many people sabotage their own victories just when they are about to achieve them. It's not weakness. It's unconscious loyalty to a ceiling that should no longer be there. And your higher self is trying to dismantle that ceiling, brick by brick, even when you don't realize it. Sometimes it does this by allowing you to live experiences that show you how absurd that limit is. Sometimes it places you near people who live with a freedom that makes you uncomfortable, not because they are better than you, but because their mere presence confronts your internal programming. Sometimes it takes away things you thought you needed, just to prove to you that you survive perfectly without them. All of that is part of the silent work of your higher self. A work that isn't noticed until one day you look back and say, "I can't believe how much I've changed," without realizing it. But the moment someone consciously refuses to keep honoring that ceiling, reality begins to respond differently. Not magically, not instantly, but undeniably. Your higher self has never been waiting for you to become worthy. It has been waiting for you to stop acting as if you weren't. That is the real change. Not fixing yourself endlessly, not becoming perfect, not earning the permission to finally live fully. The change happens when you realize that the version of life you desire might not have been put inside you to torture you. Maybe it was put inside you because your soul already recognizes it as yours. And that connects with everything you've been feeling lately. That recurring vision that returns to your mind when you're alone. That image of the person you know you could become. That lifestyle that seems impossible but won't leave your thoughts. That isn't ego, it isn't fantasy, it isn't escapism. It is memory. Your soul remembering something that already belongs to it and waiting patiently for you to give it permission to claim it. Once you stop resisting that possibility, your entire relationship with reality begins to change. You start to notice that synchronicity appears more often. You start to receive information at the exact moment you need it. You start to run into the right people almost by accident. And what you once felt as effort now starts to feel more like flow. Not because life has become easy, but because you have finally stopped fighting with yourself. And that brings me to the close of this video. If you've made it this far, it wasn't by chance. Something inside you recognized that it needed to hear this message today at this specific moment in your life. And that is already enough proof that your higher self was guiding you. Even to watch this content, don't underestimate that. Remember what we saw. The moments when reality feels fragile are awakenings in disguise. The recurring obsession with a certain kind of life is recognition, not fantasy. The recent feeling of invisibility is protection, not rejection. The delays you are experiencing are filters that are shaping a version of you that will be able to sustain what is coming. And the invisible ceiling you've carried for years isn't real. It's just an agreement your mind signed when it was still too young to know it had options. The deepest lesson of all this is simple, but few truly live it. Your higher self isn't waiting for you to transform into someone else. It is waiting for you to give yourself permission to be who you have always been inside. You don't have to become perfect. You don't have to heal every wound before you start receiving. You don't have to be ready. You just have to stop believing you aren't allowed. And here is my question for you. The one I want you to answer in the comments because I am genuinely interested in reading what you are going to write. What was the last strange sign, synchronicity, dream, or sensation that you ignored, and that now, after watching this video, you realize was probably your higher self trying to talk to you? Write it down below. Sometimes simply naming the sign out loud, or in writing, is what activates it completely. And before you go, if this content resonated with you deeply, remember that right below in the description you have the 7 keys to prosperity waiting for you. That material is specifically designed for people who already feel the call, who already hear the internal voice, but who need concrete tools to align their energy with the abundance that belongs to them. Don't let another month pass by postponing the life that keeps calling you from within. If your higher self brought you to this video, it is probably also pointing you toward that next step. Take care. Trust that the version of life toward which you keep feeling drawn exists for a reason. And remember, you weren't behind. You were growing. And now, finally, you are ready to listen. I'll see you in the next video.